We've all heard countless times that too much sugar is bad for us. But how bad is it really? And given all the other things we have to worry about in life, how much should we worry about sugar? After all, the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, is referred to several times in the Torah as Eretz Zvas Chalav Davash, the land flowing with milk and honey. And honey is the form of sugar most common in the ancient world. If the land of Israel is praised for its sugar, its sugary qualities, it sounds like a nice thing to enjoy sugar. And indeed it is. And there's nothing Jewishly wrong with enjoying a little sweetness. Part of the problem, or maybe the main problem, is that human beings have become so good at extracting sweetness from fruit and adding it to just about everything that the average kitchen has become a land flowing with milk and honey. And its addictive potential has led to serious health problems for many people. But before we get into the nutritional, medical knowledge we have about sugar and the forms of sugar, let's just talk today about the Torah perspective on sugar. The Torah perspective on sugar, I think, must begin with the Torah perspective on food in general. And for this, I'd like to quote Rabbi Dr. Akiva Tatz. We put him, along with 180 other Divrei Torah, in Body and Soul. And I have here on page 37, Rabbi Tatz saying as follows: eating is the central pillar of what it means to be human. It is an absorbing of the world and transmuting it into something higher. It is the energy that keeps body and soul together. And it does it by absorbing the energy of the world and incorporating it into what you are. In other words, food is more than just a physical necessity. It's part of God's master plan for the universe, for it to be central to our lives as humans. And the central role of food we see in the Sefer Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, which prescribes very specific spices, flavors, ingredients to be used in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple. We see that using food, using offerings, animals, grain offerings, and others, that the use of food is central to our relationship to God. In fact, the rabbis tell us that we should look at our table as an ersatz altar, something like a substitute altar or a symbolic altar. When we eat at our table, we are, in a sense, eating at God's altar if we relate to our meal properly. So it's very interesting. In Vayikra, in Leviticus, Perek Beis Yud Aleph, chapter 2, verse 11, the Torah seems to go out of its way to exclude sugar. Listen to the verse. All types of leavening and sugar you may not burn in a fire offering to God. Now that's a very interesting detail. What is the rule about what may go on God's altar in the Beis HaMikdash? How do we know what may be placed on the altar, what may not be placed on the altar? If you've ever studied this, you know that there's a very simple rule. Sheep, goats, cow are examples of things that are allowed on the altar. Giraffe, not allowed. There's no chicken offering. Even if you're an asparagus farmer and you would love to bring God an asparagus offering, it's not allowed. How do we know it's not allowed? Simple. The Torah doesn't allow it. The rule is whatever's mentioned explicitly is allowed on the altar. Whatever's not mentioned is not allowed. It's a simple rule. So why then does the Torah mention that sugar is not allowed? If the Torah had been silent on the subject of sugar on the altar, we would know by the rule that it's not allowed. Apparently, the Torah is trying to tell us there's something particularly antithetical about sugar to the function of the altar, the Mizbeach, and by extension, symbolically, to our table at home. What is it that sugar is? What is it sugar represents? What is it sugar symbolizes that somehow doesn't belong on God's table? We hear from the rabbis, Chazal say in Eruvin, Yud Ches Amud Beis, page 18b. The dove. This is the dove of the story of Noach, the Yonah. The Yonah said to God, "May my food be as bitter as the olive, but entrusted to your hand, rather than sweet as honey and dependent on a mortal." This is the symbolism of the dove holding the olive, the bitter olive leaf in its mouth. It'd rather have a bitter olive leaf coming from God than something sweet and tasty coming from a human being. In other words, sugar represents taste, joyous experience of a good taste. That's all it is. It's only about taste, which in Hebrew is called taiva, a desire for something that is not aiding your nutrition, has no nutritional benefit. It's simply there for the taste. And on this topic, Sefer Chinuch has a very powerful lesson, which I'd like to share with you. He says, this prohibition of sugar on the altar, on the Mizbeach, teaches that a person should limit his chasing after foods that please the palate in the manner of gluttons and drinkers who are always drawn to everything sweet, and that one should only pay attention to foods that help the body and that are necessary for its vitality and for maintaining the health of its organs. Towards this goal, it is fitting for an intelligent person to approach eating and drinking without prioritizing the palate. Sefer Chinuch, Mitzvah 117. I'd like to point out, the Chinuch says limit, not eliminate. Surely practicing self-control around sugar is fundamental to the journey of a soul. It's good for our souls to practice that kind of self-control. And some of our greatest role models in our history understood this principle, and we know that they themselves limited their sugar intake. And I mentioned in the previous shiur Rav Moshe Feinstein, who took a vow never to put something in his mouth only for the taste. I just want to stress, this is not a call to ban sugar at all. This is, I think, the Torah teaching us, the first lesson regarding sugar is to control it, to eat it in a controlled way, and not eat, as the Chinuch says, as a glutton or a drunkard. And to maintain that self-control is not easy in this world where we are overwhelmed by sugar in almost everything. And in the next shiur, Bezrat Hashem, we will talk about some of those details of the good sugars versus the bad sugars, and how the doctors and nutritionists advise us to maintain our self-control according to the Chinuch and the Torah, and also at the same time maintain our health. Until then, be gesund.